Some of the richest people in the world give away billions of dollars to charity every year. But who are they? And where does all the money go? You'll find out in this episode of
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello, my name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And together with nearly 50 years of teaching English between us, we'll help you improve your English and take your pronunciation, your grammar, your vocabulary, all aspects of it to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm feeling pretty good, Craig. What about you?
Yes, I'm thinking how much of my teacher's salary I should donate to charity this week. What about you?
I've already decided, and I'm afraid it's going to be something less than 1%. I would like to give more, but I simply don't have the money. I'm sorry.
Before we talk about these million and billionaires that are giving their money away, we've got some voice messages to look at. The first one is from Ignacio from Argentina, who's asking about the pronunciation of the letter T.
Hello, Craig and Reza. How are you? I'm Ignacio and I live in Tucumán in the northwest of Argentina. It's one of the smallest cities too. I have a little doubt about the letter T. Is it possible that consonant has two types of pronunciation? That is, in some cases stronger and in another softer? For example, in sentences or phrases like "what about it?" or "but I remember." In fact, I have listened to Craig in the episode 354, where in one moment he said, "what about it?" or something like that. Well, that's all. I hope you answer. See you later.
Thanks very much for your message, Ignacio. That's a really interesting question. By the way, your pronunciation is really, really good. Clearly, you're a person who pays a lot of attention to pronunciation because your question is all about pronunciation, the letter T. Good question, isn't it, Craig?
Yeah, what about it?
What about it? I didn't hear any consonant at all there. I just heard, what about it?
Or should I say, what about it?
Or you could say, what about it?
Yeah.
But why you would use a silly voice like that? I don't know, but you might.
That was a very silly voice, Reza. But no, seriously, Ignacio, you are very observant and you have a keen ear, we could say, K-E-E-N, a keen ear to notice the different pronunciations of the T sound. I'm from London, and by saying that, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, it's a regional thing. It can be a regional thing. I know people from my part of London who pronounce the T, so they would say, what about it? As you did, Ignacio. And also people who pronounce the T with what's called a glottal stop. That's a pronunciation term which means the sound sometimes gets trapped in the throat and doesn't come out. The air doesn't come out through the teeth. So you don't hear what, you hear what. So it's getting stuck in the throat. And that's a very common pronunciation characteristic of the south of the UK.
Another aspect is British English compared to American English. Very often the letter T, written T, in American English gets pronounced as if it were a letter D. So for example, some people might say party, whereas others in America particularly would say party. Yeah, you get the idea? Or chatty, chatty. So T can come out, T sounds can come out as D sounds, as if they were letter D, particularly for American speakers.
So I don't think there's necessarily a right way or a wrong way, an incorrect way to pronounce the T. The secret is to do what you're doing, Ignacio, to notice that different people pronounce the T sound, the T sound, in a different way, and just recognize when they're speaking that you understand the words they're saying, and then you decide how you want to pronounce it. My friends at school, when I was growing up and learning English and speaking, my friends used that glottal stop. So they would say but and not but. And my dad always corrected me. He said, say the T, speak properly, say but, don't say but. Say all right, don't say all right. But I never really did. Although when I started teaching, I started to pronounce the T a bit more. So my pronunciation sometimes changes from pronouncing it to not pronouncing it.
One little thing about how you described those different sounds, you said stronger for T and softer for D. Softer, yeah, softer D. But we would say that the T sound, like party, is harder. We wouldn't say stronger. So the T, party, is harder. And the party, D, is softer, harder and softer. By the way, if you're interested in working in the UK or in Germany, keep listening until the end of this podcast for a job offer announcement from a Gold Patreon supporter of our show.
Next, we have 2 messages from Carolina from Argentina.
Hi, Reza. Hi, Greg. I'm Carolina from Argentina. I am very grateful with your podcast, and I want to tell you about talking about the population growth and the reduction of the other species like gorillas, elephants, giraffe, etc. I have a great idea to talk about the famous entrepreneurs and the most rich people that has different foundations that helps the world. It's a very interesting issue, and it's good to know more about these issues. Well, thank you very much. See you.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for sending in your messages. Your first message, we can improve a little bit. You said, I am very grateful with your podcast. That's a preposition error. Be careful of those prepositions. It's better to say, I'm very grateful for your podcast. You're grateful for something or thankful for something. And you seem to be interested in subjects that we have spoken about and touched on in the past. With renewable energy, we covered that in episode 284. And new food sources might be interesting for you. That was episode 341. And we spoke about nature and the environment in episode 86. It's not exactly about the effects of population growth, but it may be interesting for you because it's a similar environmental subject. So for those episodes, go to inglespodcast.com/96 or /284 or /341.
And your second message, Carolina, was completely different. You were talking about, you said the most rich people, but it's more correct to say the richest people, because rich is an adjective with one syllable. So when you make that superlative, just add est. The richest people and their contribution to society through foundations. A little mistake, you said foundations that helps. Well, no, because if foundations is plural, then the verb has to agree with that. Foundations that help. If you put S on the end of a verb, it's not plural, remember, it's third person singular. So he helps or a foundation helps, but foundations that help. No S on the verb.
So thank you for your idea, Carolina, for this episode, which focuses on rich people who have given a lot of money or entrepreneurs that have changed the world. If you give money to a foundation or an organization or a charity, we have a special verb in English. It's donate. To donate money. The noun is donation and the collocation is make with make. So to make a donation. If you make a donation, you are a philanthropist. Philanthropist. That's the noun. What's the adjective, Reza?
From philanthropist, we have the adjective, difficult to pronounce, philanthropic.
Oh, I noticed a stress change there on one of the syllables.
Yeah, philanthropist. So it's in the second syllable when it's a noun, philanthropist, but it's philanthropic. It's on the third syllable when it's the adjective. And there's also the noun for the activity, which is philanthropy. It's again back on the second syllable. So if you are a philanthropist, we could also say that you are a important donor. So if you donate money, if you make a donation, you're a donor. DONOR.
And another useful expression that we use in this episode is the net worth of a person or a company. And when we use the word net, we're not speaking about a basketball net or a tennis net. We're not talking about red. We're talking about the money that's left after deductions. So in Spanish, you'd say neto. So the net worth of a person is the money that they have after everything else. And that means adding up and calculating the total amount of all their assets. And the assets of a person is money, it's property, it's land, it's everything you own are your assets.
So very often when people are going to donate money, they have a fund, F-U-N-D. That's the Spanish word fondo. So that money which is collected, which is gathered for a specific purpose, is a fund.
And as Carolina mentioned in her message, the word foundation, very similar in Spanish, fundación, a foundation provides money for people who are in need. That expression, to be in need of something. Now, that could be food, it could be shelter, somewhere to live, it could be for study, research. Foundations are very often non-profit. So they're different to companies because the purpose is not to make a profit. The purpose is to help or do research.
One verb which is probably new to many of you is the verb to pledge. P-L-E-D-G-E, to pledge. It can also be a noun, a pledge. So if you make a pledge or you pledge some money, that means that you promise that you're going to make a donation.
So after we received Carolina's message, we went, of course, on the internet to look at the people who have donated most. And we went to the Forbes site, and the link to the source of this information can be found in our show notes at inglespodcast.com/361 for this episode. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is the largest private foundation in the world. It was launched in 2000, and the verb to launch means to start or begin a business or an organization or a program. In Spanish, you'd say lanzar. Current assets of this foundation, $46.8 billion. And we're recording this podcast in March 2021, so that will probably change in the future. Any more information about this foundation?
Yes, so what does this Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation do? Well, the primary goals of the foundation are to enhance healthcare. To enhance means to make something better. To enhance healthcare and reduce extreme poverty around the world. And the foundation has also been at the center of vaccine research, very important word you need to know these days, vacuna, vaccine research, for years, so long before the COVID-19 coronavirus arrived, even long before that, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has committed a lot of money. In fact, up to now, $1.75 billion for pandemic relief over the last 2 years.
And speaking of coronavirus, the ex-New York City mayor, Michael Bloomberg, he's given $330 million also in COVID-19 related funding. And someone I'm sure you've heard of, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, has given at least $100 million.
Jeff Bezos, another name you probably know, he's the founder and CEO, Chief Executive Officer of Amazon. And he is, at the time of this recording, although these things change, but at the time of the recording, he is the richest person in the world. His net worth at the minute is $188 billion. So Jeff Bezos has given some money to COVID-19 relief as well. But you might say not exactly with a lot of enthusiasm, because he was very heavily criticized. Because his ex-wife, Mackenzie Scott, they got divorced in 2019. She has given more than anybody else during the pandemic. She has given $5.8 billion to 500 different charity groups in just 1 year alone, 2019. And because she gave so much and Jeff Bezos hadn't really given anything at all, he was criticized. And as a response to that, he has donated money, but only after his ex-wife did first. There's nothing like an ex-wife or an ex-partner to show you up, is there? To show someone up is ponerte en ridículo, pintarte mal, yeah? Good old ex-partners. Personally, I take my hat off. That means I applaud, I praise Mackenzie Scott because she has given so much money, and particularly for her work, because her donations focus on really important things like racial inequality. She's interested in decreasing poverty, ending sexual orientation and gender equality, discrimination, and ending food insecurity.
Yeah, we spoke 2 episodes ago in episode 359 on people living on the bread line, in the episode about bread. So food insecurity, people who don't have enough to eat and they don't know where their next meal is coming from. So Mackenzie's given the most money in the shortest space of time. And as like Reza said, her ex-husband, Jeff, the Amazon guy, has been criticized a lot until eventually he gave the largest single donation in 2020. He gave $10 billion to help fight climate change, although we wonder if maybe he had no choice. He had to give some of his money away.
Craig mentioned earlier the ex-New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, also a person who for a while was considering becoming the president of the United States, but finally he withdrew his candidacy. He's a very rich man. There seems to be a bit of an advantage to being very rich, increasing your chances of becoming the president of the United States, by the way. He's worth $54.9 billion. And he's given $11.1 billion, that's a lot of money, to spend on gun control, yeah, because there's a lot of shootings in the United States, education, climate change, and public health.
You may have heard of Warren Buffett. He's an investor, and he's a very large contributor to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that we mentioned at the beginning. He's donated $42.8 billion during his lifetime, and his net worth at the time of recording this is $88.8 billion. Now, he's pledged, and we said the meaning of pledged at the beginning, he's made a very strong promise to give away 99% of his fortune during his life. And to quote Warren Buffett, he said, "Were we to use more than 1% of my claim checks on ourselves, neither our happiness nor our well-being would be enhanced." So let's look at some vocabulary here. The claim checks he speaks about, I'm assuming the payment he gets, the interest on his investments, because these rich people, they have money that's tied up That phrasal verb to tie up money means it's closed inside investment accounts, but you get interest on that money. So were we to use, is an interesting inverted sentence, were we to use more than 1% of this money on ourselves, on our family, our happiness wouldn't really be enhanced, it wouldn't be improved. So he's realized that he doesn't need really 99% of all the money he has.
Yes, I just want to make a special note about Warren Buffett because he's my personal favorite on this list. When I say favorite, well, he's the one I like on this list.
The only one.
No comment about that, but he said something which I really, really respect, and I take my hat off to him. He said it way back in 2007. So as well as donating a lot of money to charity, he said that he found it was unfair. He complained. He was not happy that his rate of tax, rate means percentage, the rate of tax that he had to pay was less than his cleaning lady, the woman who on very low pay cleans his office. I'm not making that up. I wish I was. But the way the tax structure worked at that time, and probably still, cleaners employed on the type of contract they have to give a higher percentage of their income in tax than an extremely wealthy multi-millionaire. Billionaire, and that's the way. But at least Warren Buffett complained about it, and he said it shouldn't be that way. And I happen to agree with him, I have to say.
Yeah, there aren't many people I know who would ask to pay more taxes. Another famous investor, George Soros, was born in Hungary, Hungarian born, and he has given $18.8 billion. His charity foundation's called Open Society. They mainly focus on things like democracy, education, anti-discrimination, and healthcare. And these foundations formed by Soros reach 120 countries worldwide. So he's a very far-reaching philanthropist. He gave $220 million to leaders in black communities after the killing of George Floyd, which has come back in the news at the moment because of the trial. That's in the US only. And he also gave $37 million for undocumented immigrants that were excluded from US federal aid after COVID. So he's helping immigrants who are not covered by the COVID aid package in the US.
Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, together have a net worth of $90 billion. And so far, to date, when we are recording this, it's March 2021, they've given $2.7 billion. Their donations are mostly focused on election integrity, getting voting right, making sure it's fair. But also, not surprisingly, they've given a lot of money to COVID-19 treatment. Craig, why are they so interested in elections?
Well, some listeners might remember that Facebook was involved in some controversy after recent US elections. And what they were quoted as saying on their webpage is they donated this money to ensure voters could cast their ballots safely and securely. So ensure means obviously to make sure, and to cast their ballots really means to vote. So they wanted to make sure that democratic elections in the US are safe and secure. Now, if you want to see a full list of 25 philanthropists on the Forbes webpage, I put a link in the show notes. Go to inglespodcast.com/361. We've mentioned the names here that you might recognize. There were quite a few names on the list that I hadn't seen before. And among those names, one jumped out at me. Reza, have you heard of someone called Charles Feeney?
No, I haven't. Who is he?
Well, do you remember years ago when you flew? You remember flying? You remember,
when we
you remember
still
that? Do you remember the duty-free shoppers, the duty-free shops in airports?
Yeah.
He co-founded duty-free shops.
Wow.
and a multi-billionaire, loads and loads of money, who promised to die broke. He pledged to die broke. Broke means to have no money. And he's almost done it. He's given away over $8 billion. And he only has he only, in inverted commas, he only has $2 million left. But if you think of how much $1 billion is, and he had 8 billion and he gave it away, now he has only 2 million, he's gradually giving away all his money and he wants to die with no money. And that really jumped out at me from the list of people. So if you want to see the full list, go to the website and check it out. Reza, what do you think? Are these billionaires real philanthropists? Do you think that they do this from the goodness of their heart, or are they just avoiding paying tax?
Well, who knows? Only each individual knows what their true intentions are. I'm sure in most cases, it's a bit of both, to be honest. Forgive my cynicism. To be cynical means you don't take things at face value. You think there might be something else which isn't being made explicit. You're a bit suspicious. If you have a lot of money, you're going to be taxed a lot of it anyway. Although, as Warren Buffett points out, not as much as you possibly should. But still, you're going to have to pay a lot in tax. So, since you're going to lose, let's say, in inverted commas, a lot anyway, make it look much better by giving it away to charity. So I understand that money donated to charity generally in nearly all countries in the world avoids taxation, or most taxation. The charities get it free. So suddenly it's a lot less money that you, the billionaire, gets taxed on. And hey, you're a fantastic person. You've given $10 million to something. In fact, maybe 8 million of that was going to be taken from you in tax anyway. So you give 2 million. But you look fantastic. You're helping a lot of people. And it is great that you help a lot of people. So if I was in their position, I would do the same. And yeah, I would probably take advantage of the publicity.
And the areas that we've spoken about in this podcast, the areas of healthcare, COVID-19, poverty, global warming, climate change, is it the responsibility, or do rich people have some responsibility to help solve these problems, or should it be only the problems of governments?
That's a good question. What do you think?
I think if you have that much money, you should do something. And obviously everyone has the freedom to choose where they donate the money to. But yeah, I think if you have that much money, if you're in the billions, then you do have a responsibility to give some back and help society.
And for somebody like Jeff Bezos, what's more useful? Donate money to charities of his choice when he feels like it, and sometimes only under duress. That means when forced to, under duress. Possibly because his ex-wife's making him look bad. Or increase the conditions and pay of your own workers who work for Amazon. What's more useful?
You should do both. You should invest it in your company, and you should also give it away if you've got a lot of a big personal fortune. I mean, no one wants to be the richest person in the cemetery.
Yeah. Yet Amazon is often criticized heavily for its poor treatment of its own employees. So why not spend some of the money on treating them better?
Yeah, but you have to make a difference between the money the company makes and the money Jeff Bezos has as his assets, because the money has a liability to the shareholders of the company. You could argue that's not Jeff Bezos' personal responsibility.
Yep, you could, although I imagine he makes the decision of how it's distributed. But yeah, his shareholders...
Not necessarily. The board would do that, because the board, they have the responsibility to the shareholders. So he has a say in it,
yeah.
But probably the board votes on how much pay the workers get. It's not only his decision.
I'd like to know, though, does he propose it? Whether they vote for it or not, simply does he ask for it?
I would like to know that too. If you were a billionaire, Reza, and you had as much money as Jeff Bezos, what donations would you make?
I would be a billionaire for a very short period of time, because I would get rid of the money very quickly. Seriously,
What would you spend it on?
because I wouldn't like to be taxed heavily. I'm very happy to pay the tax that I should, but I like the idea of giving money to the charities of my choosing, just the same as these billionaires who I've been criticizing.
And which charities would you choose?
Oh, many, many charities. I try and spread it. I like to spread it among quite a lot of causes, yes. But I would try to keep the publicity for me to a minimum, because I wouldn't like to be a hypocrite, because here I am criticizing people taking advantage of the publicity. So I must admit, I would like in some cases for people to identify my name with the causes, but partly to promote the cause. But I would also be happy to make some anonymous donations. What about you?
Yeah, the same. I think I'd also make anonymous donations, but I'd probably focus more on healthcare, I think, and or cancer, because I've lost people in my family due to cancer. So probably cancer research will be a big one. But like you, I would spread it or distribute it among various charities.
Another question, Craig. What's more urgent in your opinion? Helping anybody in any country with problems that anybody could face, for example, cancer or other difficult situations, sexual discrimination, or making sure that people in very poor countries eat and don't die of starvation? What's more important?
If I had to choose, that's a difficult question, because as I mentioned, I'd like to distribute it and spread it, but probably dying of starvation in this day and age, in this year, 2021, is something that's very hard for me to accept, because there is enough food. There is enough food for everyone. We can feed everybody. So it's crazy to me that people are dying of starvation, but people are also dying of malaria and other diseases. And there are cures for the diseases that they're dying from. And also COVID. COVID vaccinations are not reaching some of the poorer countries, and they should be. So there's just so much to spread. There's so much to solve, so many problems to solve. So I just don't know. What about you?
No, the same as you. It's hard. It's hard to decide. Although I have a general tendency to want to satisfy basic needs first. I mean, this is putting it really crudely. To be crude is like very extreme and straight to the point. But for example, being depressed is a terrible thing, particularly clinical depression. And it could even cause death in the long run. But it's not going to kill you immediately. Whereas if you don't have enough food and water, very quickly you're going to die. So for me, it would be more urgent to satisfy those basic needs, which have to be satisfied first. Get some food and water into you. Then later, you may or may not be depressed. But if you haven't got the food or water into you, you're not going to be depressed. It doesn't really matter if you have cancer or not. You're going to die because you don't have enough to eat and drink. So I would be more inclined to donate most of my money in poor countries, I have to say.
Yeah, and there are even countries who don't have access, or communities that don't have access to clean water. And the water in some places is contaminated, and that's a basic need. So, yeah, lots of things to do. But we'd like to know where you would spend your money if you were a billionaire. So let us know. Please get in touch. You can send your voice messages, as usual, to speakpipe.com/inglespodcast. Emails, Reza?
You could write to Craig. You'll find him at craig@inglespodcast.com, or me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And don't forget to visit the online store of La Mansión del Inglés. You can find that at store.mansioningles.net.
As usual, we'd like to thank all of you who have donated money to us. And you are not millionaires or billionaires, I suppose, but through the Patreon scheme, you have voluntarily and very generously helped our cause by donating as little as $1.20 per month. That includes the value-added tax that has to be paid. The 20 cents more or less is for that. But by paying that money, as a thank you, you'll get instant access to recent transcriptions. If you're interested, just look at Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/inglespodcast.
And we'd like to thank all of you who are supporting us over there, especially thank you to new Patreon supporters who have joined us this month. There's someone who has not left a name, so we do respect your anonymity. Thank you, whoever you are. José Pascual Jimeno Mari has joined us, and Ángel Clavijo Martinez. Also, thank you very much. And also thank you to Enrique Gonzalvo, who has increased the amount that he's donating. So thank you, Enrique. And also Ricardo Gonzalez. Thank you very much. We also want to say thank you to our gold sponsor this month, Gabitel Ingenieros. What do they do? Well, they're involved in many areas of engineering, but perhaps of interest to you is that they are currently working on an important project in the UK for laying down, that means installing, to lay down, to install, fibre optic cable. If you would like to join their team and work in the UK, they are accepting job applications right now. To apply, you must have pre-settled or settled status in the UK. If you don't know what that means, we explain it fully in episode 342 about Brexit. But if you're hearing those words and you know, oh yes, I have that, or I know what that is, then you are in a good position to apply for this job. So pre-settled or settled status. If you have that status and you want to work for a growing, expanding company, send your CV, your curriculum vitae, or in American English, your resume, send your CV to seleccion@gabitelingenieros.com. Now, don't worry if you're driving, if you're riding a bicycle, if you don't have a pen at the moment, you can't write that down, don't worry. The email address is in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/359. And Gabitel is also expanding in Germany. So if you have a good level of German and you're interested, send your CV to the same address, seleccion@gabitelingenieros.com. And Reza and I would like to thank Rodrigo, Genoveva, and all the good people over at gabitelingenieros.com for being a gold sponsor of the show.
Craig, what have we got coming up on next week's episode?
Well, next week we're going to have a bit of fun because many of you have been asking about how to improve your speaking, how to be more fluent in English, and we've got a selection of activities that you can use with a friend, a partner, anybody else who speaks English. We'll show you how you can speak and have fun and do games and activities in English to improve your speaking. We hope you join us for that next week. Thank you very much for listening this week. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.